Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be casting our ever-critical eye over another 10th edition datasheet. But this time, we are going to be taking a break from looking at guard datasheets and instead look at a potentially very useful allied datasheet. In the swirling, ever-changing meta of competitive play, the Armored Warglaive may have just become a very good choice for Imperial Guard players. It's got firepower, it's got speed, it's even got some melee, which right now Guard is really struggling with, and it's also got a very attractive points price tag. And with those bold statements made, let's not mess around any further, and without further ado, let's deep dive this thing. As is tradition, let us begin with a cheeky gander at the Armature Warglaives stat line. First up, we've got a movement value of 12 inches. This is pretty fast, and it's definitely faster than the majority of the Guard motor pool, which tends to get along at a respectable but not speedy 10 inches a turn. It's also important to note that a lot of Guard vehicles end up giving up movement because of things like pivot, whereas the Armored Warglaive is on a perfectly circular base. It's not on an oval base, it's on a circular base. And so it doesn't give up much movement for pivoting at all. A lot of newer players overlook things like movement, but especially with a multi-role unit like the Warglaive, where it can do melee and it can do ranged, movement can be very pivotal. It means that it can get angles that it wouldn't normally be able to get with its guns. It means that you can get a little bit closer, so when you go for the charge, you can actually make the charge, and it's like a 7-inch charge rather than like a 9-inch charge. So movement generally wins game. If you're a newer player, it can be really easy to overlook how important movement is. There's a saying in 40k, movement wins games. And the reason for that is because if you've got a high movement, it means that you might be able to get the angle round the line of sight blocking terrain that you wouldn't normally be able to get. And therefore you can bring your guns to bear. It means that if you've got a unit with decent melee potential, you can get a little bit close to the enemy. Therefore you can make your charges shorter. It also means that you can get onto objectives. And what's really cool about the Warglaive is, unlike so many Guard units which can do one of those things, but not all of them. Let's say Lean Russers have got the firepower, but not really the OC or the melee capability. You've got Infantry, which have got the OC, but not really the melee or the firepower capability. And then you've got things like Bullgryns, which have got some melee potential. They're more durable, but they're our best melee unit right now. But their OC is a bit low, and their movement is a bit low, and their firepower is a bit low. But with the Armored Warglaive, it's got the speed. As you'll see, it's got the objective control, it's also got the firepower, and it's got melee. So its movement ties into allowing it to operate successfully in every single phase. And it just unlocks a lot of good stuff about this unit. It's very, very strong. Let's move on to the rest of its stat line. We've got a toughness of 10 with a 3+ save and 12 wounds. That is reasonably durable. I think it's really important to understand that whilst the Armature has a lot going for it, and I think they're really, really cool, I think they've got a lot of potential. Not that hard to kill. A lot of Guard vehicles will feel more durable than an Armature. And that comes down to simply Guard vehicles tend to have a 2+ save. The Armature's only got a 3+. In the past, when I've covered the Armature, I've talked about it being roughly equivalent in durability to a Guard vehicle because it does have a 5+ invulnerable save as well, which you can only get that 5 up against ranged attacks. In a Knight detachment, I think that can be true because you can pay CP for things like rotate ion shields to get you to a 4+ invulnerable save, and a 4+ can be really, really good. But I think as an allied vehicle, I think that the Armored Warglaive is less durable than most Guard vehicles. And I think you need to be aware of that. And I would say it's its biggest weakness. But the reason for the air quotes is that the Armature's not going to go down to a bunch of spare firepower. It's still going to require dedicated firepower on your opponent's part. But if your opponent wants to kill it, it probably will go down. So when you look at this durability, I mean, you're looking at something that's like a chimera. Do you know what I mean? Chimeras are reasonably durable. They do take a decent amount of punishment, but they're not on the same level as a main battle tank. So when you see the armature, see chimera levels of durability, not Lehman Russ levels of durability. Legion 7 is okay. Nothing really to write home about. It gets the job done. OC8 is fantastic, and I love it, and I will not be able to say enough good things about this. OC8? That's more OC than a goddamn Rogal Dawn. Do you know what I mean? One of the strongest things about armatures, or if you're a Chaos Knight fan, like War Dogs, is the OC8. The number of times when I've been like, okay, so I just need to like tow 2 guards onto an objective, and my opponent won't have that. And my opponent's like, no, I've got 2 armatures on there. I'm like, okay, what? So that's like 4, 6 OC? And they're like, no, it's 16. So OC8 is huge. It gives the armature great potential for sneaking objectives away. It means that it can play, like I said earlier, it can play in shooting, it can play in melee, and it can play the objective game. OC8, fantastic. I love it. So overall, you can describe the armature as a fast and furious unit with some good objective potential, but it does struggle a little bit on the durability front. But what about its offensive capabilities? What can it do to do damage to the enemy? Well, each armature comes equipped with a Questoris Heavy Stubber, a Thermal Spear, and a Reaper Chainglaive. You only have one war gear option for this knight, and it is to replace the Heavy Stubber with a Melter Gun. Looking at those weapon options first, the Questoris Heavy Stubber versus the Melter Gun, it's an interesting argument because my instinct is to say go for the Melter Gun. It's obviously got the better strength, the AP, and the damage, but it is only very short ranged, and it's only one shot. I think it really does depend on what your local meta has a lot of. If you're facing a lot of like Custodes, which with their new detachment could really be a thing, you probably go for the Melter Gun. If you play against a lot of vehicles, you probably go for the Melter Gun. If you're playing against any sort of durability, you probably go for the Melter Gun. But if there's a lot of light infantry dancing all over the place, maybe like Eldar, perhaps the Heavy Stubber is the better choice. I think if it was me, I would default to the Melter Gun, because the Heavy Stubber might chip a wound off here and there, but even if the Melter Gun only does something once every other game, that I think will be much more impactful. However, it is at this point, full transparency, that I would say I'm not 100% certain on what the best option is here. So if you have any experience with Armored Warglaives, whether you have experience with them as an allied unit or you have experience with them as a knight player, please let me know down in the comment section which is the best route to go. Is my instincts on the Melter Gun the better route to go, or is the Stubber actually hidden quite secretly quite good? And if you're wanting to know the answer to that question, then I'd recommend checking out the comment section, because more than likely someone will have posted a good take on that down there. However, all of this is just looking at the accoutrement, the extra stuff. Really, the big reason to get excited about the armature is the Thermal Spear and the Reaper Chain Cleaver. Now, you can't change the Thermal Spear, you have to take it. Fortunately, I think it's a really good weapon, and it's actually one of the things that's making me very, very interested in the Warglaive right now. Firstly, it's got Melter 4, which means that if it's in half range and you get a successful Melter shot through, then it will do a minimum of 4 damage plus the d6 from its actual damage. Now, normally with Melter guns, that's like, oh, like a 6-inch range, right? Yeah, but this is a 24-inch range. So if you get within 12 inches, you can do some big Melter damage. And it's Melter 4? It's not Melter 2, like multi-melters are Melter 2. Melter guns are Melter 2. A bunch of the like Inferno pistol things tend to be like Melter 1 or Melter 2. Melter 4 is big. It's a big old Melter spike. And I think it adds a lot of threat to the Thermal Spear. In addition to this, the Thermal Spear fires 2 shots at Ballistic Skill 3+. So again, we're not looking at like a lot of in fact, look at all of the ballistic skills for the armature. They're all 3+. It's like it comes pre-ordered with Take Aim. If you're a guard player, that's how you got to think about this. Rather than it coming with ballistic skill 4+, but then you need to give it an order so that it can hit on a 3+. Nope. This thing just hits on a 3+ all the time. That gives it a degree of accuracy, which I really like. And then, unlike so many other melter guns, it's strength 12. So none of this, oh yeah, well it's 2 shots, but like a multi-melt on a Rogal Dawn. How many times have I slagged off the multi-melts in the Dawn, being like, yeah, they're good, but the strength 9, you need those 5s, they just won't come up. Strength 12? Majority of the time, you're going to be wounding enemies, enemy vehicles, enemy monsters on 3s. If you're facing super heavy infantry like Stodes, for 6, win them on 2s. Strength 12 is what I wish all my melter weapons had. Truly, that's what I wish all my melter weapons had. It just means that I think between the rolling to hit and the rolling to wound, you're pretty much every single time you fire an Armored Warglaive, you're going to do a melter wound from it. You might drop 1 on the hit, you might drop 1 on the wound, but you won't drop 1 at both ends of that equation. And so each time you fire it, you should get a wound through. And with the AP4, if the enemy doesn't have an invulnerable save, that could be big. And if they do have an invulnerable save, well, maybe they make it, maybe they don't. But then it sort of comes down to the Vanquisher argument, doesn't it? Yeah, the Vanquisher only fires 1 shot, but typically it's going to hit, typically it's going to wound. And then it's a 50-50 if your opponent's got a 4+ invulnerable save. And this is what's kind of really, like I said, this Thermal Spear is really getting me interested in these Warglaives because it reminds me of a Vanquisher cannon. It's like a mini Vank. That's how I'm feeling about this. It's like a mini Vank. It's not quite got the strength and the flat damage, because of the Vanquisher cannon is strength 18, damage d6 plus 6, but it's firing 2 shots. And those 2 shots have the potential with the Melter 4 to really slam through some damage. And so I feel like pairing Armored Warglaives with their thermal spears with Vanquishers is, if you take 3 of these Armored Warglaives and then you take 3 Vanquishers, you are taking 6 units which create dilemmas for your opponent, because maybe they pass those 4 Pinvans. Maybe they pass them. Maybe they don't. And between the Warglaives and the Vanquisher cannons, if they pass half of those, then half of them are getting through. And that is a lot of damage that could hit your enemy. So I really like the Armigers. I'm seeing those thermal spears as mini Vanks. I'm seeing them as having good psychological potential. I'm seeing them as having good potential threat, creating dilemmas. And I'm seeing pairing Warglaives with Vanquishers as being able to be very impactful on the battlefield. But wait! There's more! Because unlike Vanquishers, these things have got melee. Now, I do see the Warglaives melee as secondary. Maybe that's because I'm a guard player and I see gun first, bayonet second. And I could tell the commissar, but it has a decent strike and sweep. If you strike, that's the big hits. You do 4 attacks at weapon skill 3+, strength 10, AP -3, damage 3. It's okay. Strength 10, sometimes you'll wound on 3, sometimes you'll wound on 5s. AP3 is okay. Flat damage. AP3 is very good. That's kicking people down to their invulnerable saves in melee if they've got one. Damage 3 is good. You're typically going to be one popping anyone who hasn't got an invulnerable save. I feel no pain. The sweep is a lot less interesting. It's only damage 1. I suppose if you are getting into like a 5-man squad like Eldar, maybe the sweep can clean them up. But like I said, this feels okay. This feels like, ooh, if the thermal spear damaged something, maybe the chain glaive can finish it off. I see the melee potential of the Warglaive as a finisher. Your thermal spears, your guns elsewhere in your guard army, they're going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But if there's some stubborn bastard that's clinging on to life on like 2 wounds, maybe it's like a vehicle or it's one or 2 survivors from like a squad, and you're like, I'd need them gone. Maybe it's going to get you secondary objective. Maybe they're even just 2 of them left alive is a big threat, like Death Company or like Custodes. You can send the Armiger in and finish them off. So it's not a melee centric unit, it's a melee capable unit, and it is capable of delivering a finishing blow, but it's not capable of doing the heavy lifting via melee. Moving on from the weapons and war gear, let's have a look at some of the abilities. Deadly Demise D3 is typical of a unit of this size. Code Chivalric doesn't matter to us because we're looking at this through the lens of allies. So really it's Impetuous Glory. Each time this model makes a charge move until the end of the turn, melee weapons equipped by this model have the Sustained Hits 1 ability. It's okay. Sustained hits are okay. We like sustained hits. It's not much to write home about. If you are going for the strike, you might get a sustained hit, but typically probably not. If you go for the sweep, you should get at least one sustained hit. Considering the melee profile of the Reaper Chain Cleaver, getting an extra hit from it is like a nice to have, but I don't think it massively moves the needle in terms of what this unit should be expected to do in melee. Now that covers the datasheet of the Warglaive, and I think you can say it's a pretty well-rounded unit. But what about the points cost? It's, at time of recording, only 140 points from an Armored Warglaive, and you're allowed to ally up to 3 of them into your guard army. That is a very attractive price point. At that price point, you almost don't care if they die. Obviously, ideally they won't instantly all die. They're almost sacrificial. They're right on the cusp there. One of the things that I've been noticing with my guard armor pools is I keep putting Vanquishers in them. And the reason I keep putting Vanquishers in them is because they're so damn cheap. It's a Lehman Russ for 145 points. It's a solid piece of armor for 145 points. The same attractiveness, the same thing is drawing me to the Warglaive. 3 Vanquishers is only 435 points. 3 Armored Warglaives is only 420 points. You could get 6 pieces of decent armor, plenty of anti-tank, plenty of volume. Even though a lot of these guns individually only find like 2 shots or 1 shots, because you're taking 6 of them in total, the volume is really there. And then don't forget, you've got all the accoutrement on the Russes, like the lance cannons and the plasma cannons, and you've got the Hunter Killer Missile. You've got the Melter Gun on the Armored Warglaive. It's got a bit of melee potential. It could, it might not do as much damage in shooting, but then it can charge in and do a bit of melee. So there's probably a similar volume to both of those. It's like what, like 855 points for all that armor, and that leaves you like nearly 1,200 points. About 1,100 points for the rest of your army. That's loads. That could be more tanks. That could be good infantry. That could be loads of artillery. And what I love about this idea of this armored core, the new model armored core of the Guard being Vanks and Warglaives together, is it feels it can plop into almost any detachment. Oh, you're taking a Hammer of the Emperor. Wow. Having some fast-moving melee potential. That also gives you loads of OC. Kind of fits in with the idea. They'll be able to keep up with your tanks that are blitzing through walls. Having this in siege attachment where you can go, my armigers aren't as durable as I would like. So I will use smoke shells on my armigers, because you can use smoke shells from the siege attachment on any allied unit. Suddenly, your armigers are all inbuilt -1 to hit. So they're now -1 to hit with T10, 3-up save, 12 wounds, 5 invulnerable save. And you've still got the smoke stratagem to be able to do that on one of your other vehicles as well. Suddenly, the biggest weakness of the armigers being that they're not that durable for a vehicle is somewhat mitigated. I think there's also a big argument to be made for taking them in a recon detachment. Because whilst the armigers themselves won't benefit from the detachment rule, they're going to come in at about a similar points cost to Sentinels. Because Sentinels, about 110 points for 2 of them. And that's for like 2 las cannons, right? But then the Sentinels have the hidden cost of needing orders to be any good. So I think once you take into account, having like a an order on them, you're getting close to about 140 points. But the armatures are bringing melee. And one of the things that Recon struggles with is melee. You know, melee is coming in and messing you up. Having these guys ready to be able to power forward, blast someone in the face, the rest of the Recon starts blasting people in the face, and then they can go in and finish them off. It means you're not having to start thinking about things like Olgrin, which are more expensive than these guys. It means you're not having to worry about things like Rough Riders, which can only do melee, and for a decent sized squad are going to come in at the same cost as one of these guys. I think it solves a few problems on the Recon front as well. Although I will say that feels more hypothetical. I'd be curious to see how that actually works out in reality of the tabletop. The only one where you might not be that bothered about Warglaives is combined arms, and that's just because it would probably be better to go for another guard tank, even if that guard tank was a bit more expensive, just so you can then feel the whole like lethal hits and stuff. Out of all of the detachments in the guard codex, these guys feel like they would really shine in siege. Like I said, they actually get to benefit from that detachment rule, which is mad. So in summary, Armature Warglaives are fast, reasonably durable, and they come with great objective potential. They have a lot of firepower for a cheap price point as well. And spamming these alongside other cheap guard armor might allow you to truly saturate the board with a lot of firepower and still have loads and loads of points left over for whatever else you want to bring in your guard army. And the great thing about them is they seem to be able to fit fairly snugly and feel at home in a lot of different guard attachments, especially the siege one. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Do you think the armatures have got some potential? Or would you always prefer taking another guard vehicle over it, even if it meant you ended up spending more points? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.